Good afternoon, YouTube. I hope you are doing well today. My name is Jackson, or Kapow Monkey 9, whichever one you want to call me. If you're new to the channel, this is probably something different than what has been played in the past. I'm a big Pokemon fan, but I'm also a big Jesus fan. And so currently I am a youth and young adults pastor. So that means I work with anyone from the age of 12 to 35. I'm working on my master's degree. And so, although I'm not an authority on some of these topics, I think that I can be as helpful as possible. Today, I want to be talking about Jesus' birth and the lies that you have been told your whole life. I think it's important that we read the text first. So we're going to be starting in Matthew chapter 1, all the way down in verse 18. And it says, "This is how the birth of Jesus, the Messiah, came about. His mother Mary was pledged to be married to Joseph. But before they came together, she was found to be pregnant through the Holy Spirit, because Joseph, her husband, was faithful to the law, and yet did not want to expose her to public disgrace. He had in mind to divorce her quietly." Now, that sounds horrible, but we'll get into that. But after he had considered this, an angel of the Lord appeared to him in a dream and said, "Joseph, son of David, do not be afraid to take Mary home as your wife, because what is conceived in her is from the Holy Spirit. She will give birth to a son, and you're to give him the name Jesus, because he will save his people from their sin." Apologies for the stopping. We're going to continue reading. "All this took place to fulfill what the Lord has said through the prophet. The virgin will conceive and give birth to a son, and they will call him Emmanuel, which means God with us." When Joseph woke up, he did what the angel of the Lord had commanded him, and took Mary home as his wife. But he did not consummate their marriage until she gave birth to a son, and he gave him the name Jesus. We'll go into a little bit of chapter 2. It says, "After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, 'Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw this star when it rose and have come to worship him.' When King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. When he had called together all the people, chiefs, priests, and teachers of the law, he asked them where the Messiah was to be born." We can go ahead and stop right there. I think I think that Matthew doesn't do as great of a job as Luke at getting all the nitty gritty details. Luke kind of gives us the idea of the manger and being swaddled and clothing and all. And those are really cool things. But I just wanted to give a general biblical understanding of the story of Jesus, right? So Jesus is born to a virgin. Virgin meaning that she was not impregnated by a man. She did not have sex with a man. In that understanding alone creates a miracle. So if you don't believe any of the rest of the stuff, you're not going to believe this. But if you can believe this, you can believe all the rest of the stuff, right? So we get into the story and we see that Mary and Joseph are not married, but they are to be, what's the word? Betrothed. There we go. Which means that they're already destined to marry each other. And Mary is probably around the age of like 14 or 15 when this is happening. And Joseph's probably around the age of 18 to 25, maybe even later, maybe 30. And Joseph is coming from a rich bloodline. Not rich in the sense of money wise, but rich in the sense of royalty. He's coming from the line of David, which says everything to who he is. And because he's the line of David, he's also the line of the Messiah. He's also the line of Abraham. He's also the line of Rahab and Ruth and all these other characters that made him who he was. Um, but the important one is the King David, right? So back in these days, if you were of the line of King David, you were considered almost royalty. You were royalty because it was out of King David's bloodline that the Messiah was going to come. So Joseph was not some random schmandom guy. And he is betrothed to Mary, which tells me that Mary's family was either wealthy or that Mary was either really good looking at 13 or 14. It's a horrible thought. Don't think too much into it. But one of the two is probably happening here. So Mary and Joseph are not these poverty-stricken people that we always portray them to be, where they can't get in anywhere. They can't. But there is some truth in the story, right? So they are heading back to Nazareth, to not Bethany, Bethlehem, and they're trying to find a place to give birth to Jesus. And we don't really know how urgent this was. It wasn't like they got in and had the baby right then. Which leads me to the next real thing that we need to talk about. The truth is, Jesus was not born in a stable. This fairy tale wooden structure where you have the little sheep on one side and you have the wise men. They're called magi here. We'll get into that a little bit. But the wise men are watching Jesus be born. That story is completely garbage. There are two ways that most historians probably predict Jesus was born. What a what a manger was this inner spot between the living room of a house and where the animals stayed. So there, it's a house, right? And it's probably got an upper room, because they're probably more wealthy than not to be able to hold Mary and Joseph. So Mary and Joseph aren't just going to some random garbage place, in this imagery, right? They are going to a house that they are going to be staying near the animals, in the same room as the animals, but they're going to be in a slanted below level where the animals are up here, and you don't have to really look at them. You don't have to smell them. You might hear a cow snore, but it's a little bit different than the manger where they're laying on hay, right? Jesus could have been laying on hay. There's no disagreement to that, but that's the one aspect of it. The other aspect is really different too. So a manger, when we're talking about animals and where animals were resting, a lot of times people who are a little more poverty stricken, which I would probably disagree with is what the situation is, would have their animals in caves. So not a manger, but a cave. Not a structure, right? But a cave. And then they would build their houses outside of the cave. So you'd have this little cavern you'd stick your animals in, because caves could stay warm or cold all day, right? If you go into a cave right now in Florida, it's going to be like 50 degrees. It doesn't matter. They're super cold. They're super condensed. It keeps your animals from burning up in the heat or freezing to death in the cold, because it's a manageable area. And so they build their houses out of these caves, and the structure would be set so that they could maintain their animals. And this was typical. So you have the image of shepherds sleeping with their sheep. Those are shepherds. Everybody had animals back then living in their house. This was not an unusual thing. Everybody had the family cow and the family goat that was passed down from generation to generation, wealth to wealth to wealth, and you could really tell how rich a family was by how many family goats they had. That's why animals were so important in the Old Testament, because animals were a sign of wealth. They helped you with your products. They helped you with your payments. You could sell your animals for things. You could sell your cow for a house. All these weird ideas that, we're just mass producing on now and have no real understanding of, right? So Jesus is born in this probably a little better than we like to think, but also a little worse than we like to think. Yes, it's probably a house, but it could be a house in a cave. So, which way do you want to balance that? Um, and so, the other aspect is that Luke kind of tells us that uh, not wise men, we'll get to that later, that when Jesus is born, a light shines, right? And the shepherds all flock to the light. Why? Because an angel tells them to. Now ask yourself, if I was a shepherd and I was sleeping out with my sheep, why on earth would I want to go where an angel tells me to go? These are some great questions, right? What are the societal differences here? The truth is, shepherds were some of the lowliest of people. They were not wealthy. That's why when Jesse is bringing in all of his sons, David, the shepherd boy, was the last, and he had to call out for David to come in, right? And of course, God used David to do so many great things. But shepherds were the lowliest of people. They didn't expect anything, they didn't expect to be invited into anywhere. So when the angel says, "Go to the light," that's where the Messiah is born. They are going with the mindset of, I've never probably been invited to anything like this. I've never been capable of dealing with so much wealth from another societal figure. And so they go and they worship him, right? And they're amazed with him. And then what happens, right? Then the Magi, the three Magi come and they bring their gold, frankincense, and myrrh, right? Well, that's not really true either. Um, the Magi, um, this this we call them wise men. I don't really know where the word wise men comes from. I think it's just English tradition. But they would study the stars, and they were very big on star worship and star ideas, and it's where we get a lot of our pagan ideas from. But they are scouting out the stars for uh, uh, the Jerusalem star that's supposed to appear, right? That's supposed to signify the Messiah being born. And they're tracking it down, and they're probably around 2 to 3 years after Jesus is actually born. Just another image that we sometimes forget about in the grand scheme of things. Um, we come from this place where uh, Jesus is born in this really nice house, and he's got all these people around, and they're probably all white if you've ever looked at a manger set. The truth is, 85% of them probably had very little pigment of whiteness to them. They were probably all Middle Eastern. Some are probably even black, darker Egyptian. You got to remember, the Jesus actually fled to the Egypt, and that's in like chapter 3 of Matthew. So they probably had connections. Who knows what situation and ties were there, what type of trade was going on, and what would actually cause Egyptians to come up. But there's a very good possibility that there were more black people there than white people, and I could 100% guarantee that. Um, but it's just these little differences that we whitewash our society with and make everything sound so, so good. I read a children's book the other day, and it was about a camel who journeyed with, I don't remember if it was the Magi or Jesus, but it was just telling the story about how the camel comes back and it worships Jesus, and it just realizes its purpose. And like, yeah, these are cool stories, but we really get thrown off track with what's actually happening. And so the overlying issue with all this story, right, is Herod, right, who is coming to kill Jesus. And he sets a decree for all that are born between the ages of 0 and 2 to be executed. It's the worst side of mass execution there is. And so that's why everybody flees to Egypt, right? To save their loved ones, to save their babies. But the truth is that Herod was actually Jewish culture. He grew up Jewish. And he had Roman traditions brought into him, but his religion was probably Jewish, and he had Greek teachings, and he was just this mutt of a person who was so well educated, and all these things that made him realize that there is going to be someone that could overthrow me. He knew what the Jewish writing said. He knew that there was going to be a Messiah, and his understanding of Messiah was a ruler. Now we think of Jesus as a heavenly ruler, right? Someone who rules over nations with love and justice, right? Herod was thinking of a ruler that was going to overtake. This was supposed to be Jerusalem's comeback year, right? That's not what happened. And so we have all these stories that jumble up the truth. And the truth is that Jesus was born in the most humble of ways. He was born not where he was supposed to be. He was born to not who he was supposed to be born to. You're supposed to be married. You're supposed to be born in a good, stable environment, not with the animals. He was born under persecution. And yet, all those things God wove around and kept Jesus from dying at a young age. And it's just, I hope that in this, you can realize that God has a plan and a purpose for every single one of us. Now, He hasn't written our lives out, but He has a goal from plan A to plan B. And He's saying that I am creating a place for you to be saved, a place for you to accept my love, a place for you to die, and a place for you to spend eternity. And that's just the cool thing about who God is. I hope you enjoyed today's, I don't really know if this is called a lesson, maybe a rant, maybe a whatever, but I hope you enjoyed. I hope you got something out of it, and I hope to see y'all next time. Have a great rest of y'all's day, guys.